after 41 days, the Senate passed a bill to finally end the government shutdown.
Yeah, 8 Senate Democrats broke from party lines to make a deal with the GOP. Instead of getting those ACA subsidies extended, there will be a vote next month on extending them, so no guarantees. The bill also includes some temporary protections for federal workers, preventing them from being riffed. The bill now heads to the House, which has been on recess for more than 40 days.
Joining us now to talk more about the fight to fund the federal government is Virginia Rep. James Walkinshaw. Thanks so much for being with us again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So how do you plan on voting on this bill? Because some Democrats, of course, voted with the Republicans, and that's really created a very large schism in the party.
Yeah, so when I learned about the bill 2 nights ago, I sat down and read it, woke up the next morning, looked at it again, and released a statement yesterday and said that I'll be a no vote on the Republican plan, the Republican budget plan. And look, I want to end the shutdown. I want our federal workers to be treated with dignity by the Trump administration. I want them to get their paychecks. But I also want to address the healthcare affordability crisis that my constituents are facing, and I've heard that from them time and time again. And my fear is that Speaker Johnson will refuse to even allow a vote in the House on legislation to extend the ACA premium tax credits and prevent healthcare premiums from doubling or in some cases tripling. So the deal that was struck in the Senate isn't good enough for me, and I'll be voting against it, but I'll also be working over the course of this week to try to get a vote in the House to extend those ACA premium tax credits.
Well, to that point, what is, or are there any bipartisan conversations happening? We've heard Republicans say that they have a health care plan. The Speaker himself has said that. Have you seen any sort of plan beyond just, hey, let's give everybody health savings accounts and allow them to spend the money that they want to, the way that they want on their health care?
Look, congressional Republicans passed the largest cut to health care in American history this year with the so-called Big Beautiful Bill that cut $1 trillion from Medicaid and could lead to cuts to Medicare as well. They have no plan to make healthcare more affordable. They have a scattering of different ideas and bills that have been proposed, but they have no plan. And right now there's an urgent crisis with the ACA premium tax credits expiring. And if they're allowed to expire, it will drive up healthcare premiums for everyone. So we need to extend those tax credits. I'm willing to compromise in terms of how long that extension could be and use that time to talk about other ways to make healthcare more affordable in America. But we have an urgent crisis right now and it needs to be addressed.
What other ways are there?
Well, look, in the Inflation Reduction Act, Democrats and President Biden worked together to allow Medicare for the first time in history to negotiate for a small number of prescription drug categories. And we now have seen that significantly bring down the cost of those prescription drugs. We should expand ideas like that. Republicans are enthusiastic about expanding health savings accounts, and I'm all for health savings accounts. They tend to work for wealthier folks and wealthier families, not really working people who might be making $50,000 or $60,000 a year. We need to do a better job of, preventive care and getting people access to services before they get sick and helping to address chronic illnesses. I think all those things can be on the table, but right now we urgently have to prevent healthcare premiums from skyrocketing, because if people lose their coverage, they won't get that preventive care. They'll still get sick, they'll still get injured, and they'll have to show up at the emergency room, which drives up the cost of care for everybody.
So in this bill from the Senate, there's money to fund military construction, veteran affairs, the Department of Agriculture, which is SNAP, in the legislative branch. It also has protections for federal workers, keeping them from being riffed. You represent about 55,000 federal workers. If you're a no on this vote, are we to believe that the healthcare piece of this outweighs all of those protections for those federal workers who you represent?
No, my other concern with the legislation is it doesn't do enough to protect federal workers. It does two things. One, it restores the $4,000 jobs that were illegally eliminated at the beginning of the shutdown. It's worth noting that the courts have already determined that those firings were illegal and have halted them. I welcome the legislation if it passes, providing extra certainty for that, but the courts have already ruled on that. It does prevent rifts until January 30th of 2026. So it temporarily prevents rifts, but it does not prevent the Trump administration from continuing to slash federal programs through rescissions packages. It does not prevent the Trump administration from continuing to illegally impound or refuse to spend dollars that have been appropriated on federal programs or federal jobs. So I don't think it provides enough protections for federal workers.
Let me ask you something that a lot of people have been talking about, at least some of the people I know. There's so much pain from the shutdown. You've talked about some of it. It's happening to your constituents. The House hasn't been in session for more than 50 days. Why should Congress members be paid?
I don't think they should be. I voluntarily had my pay withheld, or I've had my pay withheld throughout the shutdown. So I missed a paycheck earlier this month, just as federal workers have. The Constitution and the law do, I think, probably require that members of Congress get paid. I just didn't think it was right given what my constituents are going through. So I won't be paid until the shutdown is over, just like my constituents who work for the federal government.
All right, so let's say, this CR passes through the House, the government reopens. What is next on the agenda for the House of Representatives? I assume Adelita Grijalva will ultimately be sworn in. And beyond the Epstein stuff, because I know that's a big talking point in Washington, what else are you all working on in the House that will actually improve people's lives and make a difference in their daily lives?
Well, look, I think the most urgent issue will be to try to pass the 9 appropriations bills that are not included in this package, and to try to do that before January 30th, 2026, when this new CR expires, assuming that it passes this week. And my hope is that'll be a bipartisan process in a way that the process has not been bipartisan to date in the House of Representatives, at least. So I hope that we can do that. I think we need to be focused, especially given the long paid vacation that Speaker Johnson has had the House and Republicans on. We need to be focused on the everyday cost of living issues that American people are facing. So we need to push back and against the tariffs that are driving up costs. We need to address healthcare affordability. We need to address energy costs, which are skyrocketing again because of some of the measures in the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. I think the Virginians and folks in New Jersey and elections across the country told us last Tuesday they want us to focus on those issues. So I think we need to buckle down and focus on those issues.
Congressman, given everything that we've gone through, not just recently, but for years now, does the two-party system in this country work?
Wow, that is a big question for early in the morning.
Sorry.
Look, I think people across the country are looking for solutions to their problems. I happen to believe that the two-party system in this country broke down when the Republican Party nominated somebody in Donald Trump who just was wholly unfit for the office of the presidency. But look, my hope is that we can come together and work together, at least in Congress, to address these issues that people face. And look, we have a strong and vibrant democracy, despite some efforts in the other direction. Voters proved that last Tuesday. And I really believe that any member of Congress who fails to address the issues that Americans care about today, which is the fact that they feel their lives are increasingly unaffordable. If you're not addressing those issues, the voters will throw you out in November of 2026. And I've tried to warn my congressional colleagues, especially folks on the other side of the aisle, about that. It remains to be seen whether they're going to heed that advice.
All right, Virginia
Thanks.
Congressman
Appreciate
James
that.
Walkinshaw, we appreciate your time this morning. We'll see you back on the Hill. I know you're close, so you never really left the area, but we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much. The end of the longest government shutdown in history could finally be in sight.
The Senate voted to end the deadlock last night after 8 members of the Democratic caucus struck a deal with Republicans. But before the government reopens, the bill has to make its way through the House. The House is expected to return tomorrow afternoon.
To give us a sense of what that vote might look like, we are once again joined by Virginia Congressman Suhas Subramanyam. Thank you so much for being back with us, Congressman. Always good to see you. How do you plan to vote on this CR coming from the Senate, and what do you think the Democratic caucus writ large is ultimately going to do once you guys finally vote?
I plan to vote no, and I believe almost all of my colleagues on the Democratic side will vote no. Uh, the whole process around this shutdown, I think, has been flawed from the start. What we should have had was the House open from the very beginning, and we should have had the House negotiating what we want to do to solve this healthcare crisis moving forward. And then we should have been talking about exactly what's going to happen with federal workers and contractors, like protecting their back pay, making sure that future firings don't happen at this clip, and that we're being thoughtful about these risks. And so, there's some stuff in the Senate compromise that, could be good. But I don't trust the Trump administration to follow the orders or lead of Congress when it comes to protecting federal workers. I'd want more than just assurances. And I'd want more than just assurances when it comes to solving this healthcare crisis. People are already getting letters in the mail when it comes to their premiums going up anywhere from 20% to 250% was the latest one that someone told me about. So I don't think we really got enough out of it. And it certainly hurt our district and our state here in Virginia.
So 2 senators in Virginia, Mark Warner, did not vote with the Republicans. Tim Kaine did. Here's what he had to say about it as to the reason.
Virginians are very happy with this deal. I don't need a permission slip for anybody to do anything once I get Virginians' permission slip to come here and do what's best for them.
Do you agree with him, Congressman? Do you think that Virginians are happy with the decision?
I think he's right that Virginians are happy that the shutdown is going to come to an end. I don't think anyone in Virginia wanted a shutdown, at least most people didn't. I would say, though, that, Virginians also had the opportunity to vote last week, and they voted for Democrats in overwhelming numbers. And the reason is because they trust us to lower costs like healthcare costs. They trust us to protect federal workers and contractors. And the last Tuesday's results were not a ringing endorsement of the Democratic Party. What they wanted from Democrats, because I talked to a lot of voters who came to the polls and just leading up to that election, they wanted Democrats to be more forceful with the way that we legislate and the way that we fight. And they want to make sure that we're getting what we need and what the American people need out of these negotiations. And so, I would say that he's correct technically that everyone's happy there's an end to a shutdown, but I would also add that they wanted more out of this than simply a pinky promise to negotiate on healthcare later.
So as you all head back to work, then what do those negotiations with potentially Republicans look like? Because look, the Speaker has said that when it came to extending those subsidies, he was not going to bring this to the floor for a vote. Perhaps maybe that changes now that the government is back open. But are you having any sort of bipartisan conversations with Republican colleagues about doing something on healthcare to lower the costs?
No, Republicans in the House don't have bipartisan negotiations with us on these issues. I mean, that's part of the problem is that, when you're in the minority party, you only have so many opportunities to have some sort of leverage to begin with. And then it was astounding, and I think the American people thought it was astounding, that Republicans were willing to shut down the government so that they wouldn't have to prevent the doubling and tripling of healthcare costs for every American. I mean, that's incredible. And so that's why we saw the reaction we saw by voters in Virginia and across the country really last Tuesday is because they want us to lower their costs. They want us to address affordability, and they also want us to protect our institutions when it comes to federal workers and contractors. And so I don't think we got enough out of this. And I think that the fact that Mike Johnson is saying that and he hasn't changed his position leads me to believe we're not going to get a very good negotiation outcome on healthcare. And so that's what frustrates me about this whole thing.
There's been some reporting that there are some people among the Republicans who are privately chatting about the need to do something about health care because clearly it's a national issue. If they don't support the ACA, but they really push something in the House to come up with, like what the Speaker said, his own health plan, how do you see it? Or do you trust the Republicans to come up with some sort of a health plan that you think will be good for the country?
Absolutely don't trust the Republicans to come up with a plan. They've never had a real plan. The only plan they've really had on healthcare is to cut healthcare access. So that's what they've done this year. They've cut access to Medicaid. They've cut access to people who get their healthcare from the marketplace. They've made healthcare more expensive. And then they've done things like tariffs that make the cost of providing care and medical equipment more expensive. And they've let healthcare companies essentially run monopolies and raise costs on people as well. They've done nothing when it comes to lowering the cost of healthcare or lowering costs at all. We haven't really had a vote this year on lowering costs for Americans. And so, why should we trust them now? They haven't had a healthcare plan really in 20 years. And so they haven't done anything on this. And that's why, again, people are really upset. And that's why last week in Virginia, they lashed out, is because they wanted to make sure that we're electing people who are actually going to address issues like healthcare and education and other issues that families in Virginia care about.
So let's say you guys get back to work later this week. Adelita Grijalva gets sworn in down in Arizona. What's on the agenda for the House? What issues are you looking to tackle as we close out 2025?
Yeah, we're going to continue to push affordability. I'm on the oversight committee as well, and Ms. Grijalva, when she's sworn in, she's going to sign the 218th signature for the petition to get a vote on the Epstein files release. And so we're at least going to discharge that vote and get it on the floor and see where Republicans actually stand. Many of them say they want the files released, but then when you ask them to put pressure on the administration, they won't do that. They don't really want a real investigation into the Epstein case. They haven't shown good faith in that entire process. But, we're going to put that on the floor for a vote. And then, again, I'm going to keep pushing healthcare. I'm going to be pushing the protection of federal workers and contractors. And one other thing, Congress keeps appropriating money to the Trump administration, and the Trump administration misuses it. They divert funds, or they fire entire offices that are supposed to release funds, and it's a huge mess. And so we have to really look at how they're using the money that Congress is appropriating and get better results from that too. And so there's a lot of issues that are out there right now. And again, I thought this last month we should have been in session. Mike Johnson should not have closed the House. We should have been talking about all these issues that the American people are talking about. But Republicans are going to keep paying the price at the ballot box if they continue to shut out the American people and not address high costs.
So as you were talking about a little while ago, there was so much support for the Democrats in this last election, a surprising amount of support. When you looked at the polls, they overperformed. Will that momentum continue through midterms? What do Democrats have to do to keep that momentum? And of course, bring it nationwide, scale it across the country.
Yeah, I think last Tuesday, if you look at every single county in the Commonwealth of Virginia, it went from around 5 to 15 points the Democrats' way, and it was across the country too, and it's also been happening in special elections all year. So it's pretty consistent that people are moving back towards the Democratic Party. But I will say that they're not voting for Democrats because they love the Democratic Party and what they're doing right now, what we're doing right now. They're just really upset about Donald Trump and the policies coming out of this administration. What we have to do as Democrats is actually put forward a plan when it comes to lowering costs and a plan when it comes to addressing the issues that people face every day. And we've done that quietly, but what we also need to do is show people that we're willing to fight, that we're willing to stand up for our values, that we have a backbone, for instance. And so, folding early on this shutdown is not really what people were looking for last Tuesday. I think they're going to want more from us moving forward.
But to your point, Congressman, shutting down the government is a tangible way to, quote unquote, fight. Just like a tangible way to fight is to sue the Trump administration to stop something going into effect. You can delay, you can obstruct. When you're the minority party, when the math is not in your favor, what does fight mean to you? Something tangible that people can touch and say, yes, this is Democrats fighting back against this administration?
To me, it's not. It's being bold. It's being willing to understand what people are experiencing and actually putting forward like policies that will actually, solve the problem. I think there's a couple examples of this, but we're talking about prescription drugs, right? And people are having to see their prescription drug costs sometimes double, and these are life-saving drugs for people. And the Trump administration puts forward a plan to benchmark pricing against other countries, and talks about how our country is paying way too much, and they're right, and they're putting forward a bold plan, right? And I think people want to see that from Democrats too. They want to see us put forward bold plans to actually address PBMs and the whole supply chain when it comes to prescription drugs. There's just one example. I put forward a lot of bills, but we have to go out and talk to people about it. We have to make them understand that we're fighting for them too. And so some of this is, one of the things I heard from voters at the polls was, at least Trump is doing stuff, right? I've heard that all year, even if I don't like the stuff he's doing, even I'm voting against it. And so we have to actually be the same way. We have to show that we're doing stuff, that we're solving problems, that we're actually going to fight for them and be bold about this.
All righty, Congressman Subramanyam, so glad to have you back with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.